All right. What's up, y'all? Let's throw this capo on and we'll put it here on the 5th fret. And here's a guitar now in my hands, dude. And, So, folks, as I've said, I'm not much of a steel string guitarist. Crazy things with nylon strings. But who I am, as far as my name, is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. Welcome to In the Image Clothing Company podcast, where we have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ, aka the truth of all things. Now, there's 3 sides to us as a whole. I'll talk about each of them. We'll talk about where clothing needs to sit, and then we'll get into this discussion. This is episode 95 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, titled The Therapist Would Get More. And I'll get into it. So, 3 sides to us. I told you what this side is. We also have another third of us, which is In the Image Clothing Company, the main side, as I word it, where we address the human body's natural function. We come at it through the skeletal system, because it's the thing that doesn't change. Said that kind of silly. Fat content amount changes. The muscle mass amount can change if you intentionally get more, or if you are malnourished, right? Times and places. But we address the body, and we show how every joint within the body only has one neutral position that it could ever be in. And there's a center line, the sternum, the spine, the trachea, the nose, the jaw, stabilizing the entire body. It all has to stay centered on an earth with gravity. Otherwise, there's damage to the body. Our feet grip arches inward, opposing the center. And if we place clothing onto us, and there's any imbalance whatsoever, the human body's altered. And then trying to work within compensation, and the body can never work compensating. It only works as a whole, activated. Otherwise, why would there be all of it if it wasn't all doing something together? Because it can't go anywhere without all of it going. So, standing, sitting, sleeping, walking, eating, hydration, all the things physically we talk about under In the Image Clothing Company, doing them naturally. There's also another third, which is In the Image Clothing Company Music, where I play guitar, I make music, I show sizings and setups of guitars to allow the hands, which are essentially the shoulders, to be unaltered. The feet are essentially the hips, the body's just one. Just like the body of Christ. As far as disciples of Jesus Christ, we are one in and under God, the one and only Jesus Christ. So, there we go. Pants for everybody. Man, woman, tall, short, skinny, fat, any age, any part of the earth, any time period to ever be. It's always the same. Truly. They need to be entirely above our hips. So there's no restriction to the hip functionality. The angle of the waistband needs to be slightly higher in the front than the rear, because the core muscles of the human being, the only reason they are there is to always work, and they cannot if they're not shortened, which is the only way that's going to be able to happen while we wear pants. Top seams of the tops that we wear need to be evenly behind the bones on the peak of the top of our shoulders, because those are the other end of the collarbone. That's how we allow the shoulders to be in their only neutral position behind our head, where these upper trapezius muscles connect the base of the rear of the skull along the cervical spine and to the top/rear of the shoulder. That's the only place the shoulders will ever actually work. Period and done. The edge seams of our tops need to be at the edges of our shoulders, because that's the only place that the joint of the shoulder is. 2 prerequisites we have under In the Image Clothing Company. There's not always shoelaces. There's not always tags when it comes to things we place onto our bodies. When there's tags within clothing, though, they have to be removed. Tags are either causing a physical gap changing the body's skeletal system's only working position, and or not allowing musculature to activate against where the tag is placed, included with shoes. Okay? Secondly, lacing of shoes is just a rope weaved across the top of the human foot, and there's only one way the human foot is structured. It's a physical, operable, mechanical machine, not only the feet, but the entirety of the human flesh. That's all it is. And in the Image Clothing Company's shoe lacing technique, that's what we use because there's no alteration then to the feet. With that, we tie our shoes evenly over toward the center line of the human being because there's no say over having one. And if you are opposing it, you are being damaged. And in pain is the state that you will stay until you take the truth within what we say under In the Image Clothing Company and see if it can be something to benefit you as a human being, because we're all the same, and it's a shame that we can get into these chronic patternings. And actually, we're on episode 95 here of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. And this is titled, as I said, The Therapist Would Get More. I'm going to get into it in all the ways that I do, but this is huge, dude. Here's the thing. Therapies, counseling, things of that nature are not so natural. What is natural for human beings is to rely on God because we are created by Him. And what happens with therapists is people sometimes get this idea that they can go to therapy and like heal themselves entirely. And all of a sudden they're perfect because they sat there and some other human spoke some words to them. And that's a weird way to say that. I understand that was like a weird voice, a weird character, because that's how real it is. People think that you can actually be perfected. Perfected? Perfect, kid, right? People are trying to have perfect kids. And so they send them off to boarding school. They send them off to therapy, counseling. They put them in some kind of charter place or correctional facility or some place with a straight jacket, or they try to put them on the straight and narrow path by warming up their hearts. Really what they're warming up is their hot heads because they get all mad because they're not the problem, but they're painted as the villain. I'm one of those kids, dog. You hear the passion behind what I'm saying? I was always told I was wrong and that I needed help and counseling and that I should be doing things how everybody else does, and everybody around me tried to claim that they were perfect and they wanted me to be, although they were actually the ones in the wrong in those moments because I was trying to make things okay and they were trying to make me be what they wanted. Wow. So let's address my parents and how they are evil. Now let's address me, Evan Strong, and how I am evil. We're sinful by nature. No, we should not stay that way. We are sent here to overcome the natural man and be perfected after we die through Jesus Christ. So there's that little bit of a catch, if you will. But did you catch it? That it's not a catch, it's just the truth. We're in our youth, the entirety of this time on the earth, because we're just kids, dude. You can be 92, or you can be 95, like the number of the episodes that we have made as of this one when it comes to In the Image Clothing Company podcast. And this one is titled, The Therapist would get more if, and there's a lot of things I'm going to say within this, meaning even if it's just one, that's a lot because it's good context. But I'll say what I say. So condemn me for it if you want. As I say though, right, don't believe me. Don't believe me with anything that I say. Because you can believe anybody in and anybody can make you believe anything they want. And oh my heavens, talk about people trying to make you believe stuff. Those are the kind of people that are sending you to therapy. They're making you believe, trying to at least, right? Holy cow, really? You're crazy. Those people are crazy. Trying to make you believe that you're the problem. So then they send you to another human being who is an equal to all of you. Meaning you, him, her, and every one of us. And thinking that that human being will actually like turn you around. And really, they're all turned around, thinking that they can make you be something that you are not. Human beings are only what they are, designed in the image of God. And people try to go to therapy, dude, and like heal themselves. We live in a world nowadays, with a lot of, in modern day, it's the 5th of April 2025, there's this terminology used, self-help. You can only self-help until you realize you can't ever. And so maybe you go to some other human being to try to help you. Oh, great, but they're equals to you, and you're equal to them. So God is above all, and therapists would get more if they could see that. A lot of therapists are trying to give you this worldly advice and try to tell you that you can perfect yourself and that there's this self-help and that you can overcome all your problems by X, Y, and T, you know? As long as you're minding your P's and Q's and dotting your T's and crossing your I's and try again, because actually we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's, but we're all seeing things differently. So if we can see the truth in between all the things, then now we're in the space in between the vestibule, and let me do some cool things like this and use some wordplay to say the truth I got to say today. It's okay to just play a game or two, but I'm not a gamer, dude. And a lot of people treat therapy as a game, as if you can win. We cannot win. We're sent here to lose and die. And then we get resurrected through Jesus Christ after that. People think they can go to therapies and be all perfect. But this is what we talk about, when I say things on past episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, how people won't ever, in these cases, be looking at themselves when they're looking at other human beings trying to get them to be something that they want them to be. It starts with the man in the mirror, right? Michael Jackson. That's been a little bit of a theme here in the Image Clothing Company podcast episodes. The episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled A Perfect World, I went over that. You cannot, nor ever will, accomplish anything looking external, as in outside of yourself. Well, okay, there's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled It's Not Outside Yourself. I think it's actually literally worded exactly. It's not outside of yourself. So human beings will go to therapists and expect that their life will change, and sometimes it does not. And then they're all disappointed, as if that person was like this miracle worker, and there is only one God. Talk about the episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled One God. You notice how the things we discuss here are true? That's because they are apart from me. But they're also apart from the therapist as well, and we all have equal access to God. Am I pouting? What's your perception? That I need counseling, right? Because I'm getting told that left and right. Sometimes they're throwing some curveballs, and it starts on the right, and it comes around the other side, But I'm trying to look left. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Looking Left. And there's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Choose the Right. So I'm not trying to be self-righteous, but I'm out here doing what that episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast is titled, preaching what I practice, okay? On the back end. I've practiced these things. Let me talk about them. Yeah, so it is what it is. I'm also doing that other episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Do More, Say Less. And here we are. So what I'm saying, though, is one of the ways that we can phrase this, a therapist would get more than I would if I were to go to one. Self-righteous, condemn me for what I have said, right? Because then we're at this point where we're talking about here. You're only judging. Because I've said it. And so if I'm self-righteous, I'm self-righteous. But if you're pointing it out as if it's like something to like get after me for, you're being judgmental. And I have only owned up to what I said, which is just the truth. And that's the only thing that actually exists. So send me to a therapist, send me to a counselor, and send me to whatever. Let me say my mother right now. My mother's trying to tell me to go to therapy. Growing up, my father was evil. And no, I'm not perfect, dude. But you never will be. I think some therapists themselves think that they're going to become perfect in this life because they've got all the knowledge and they've gone to therapy school themselves. But really, therapists are the ones getting stuff dumped on them, dude. Therapists are the ones that need the therapists. And really, they don't. And I'm going to say what they really do need, because the answer always is Jesus Christ. And I'll get into it. And we are. And this is in the Image Clothing Company podcast, where Jesus Christ is the center of all, because he is the center of all. It is the truth of all things, regardless of if you ever want to care to be religious or not, because I'm not religious. I don't believe it. It's the truth. All right? You got a problem with that statement? You got a problem with me, Evan Strong. You've got a problem with In the Image Clothing Company. Stick around, as I say. Deeper context and you know what's going on. But that's what I'm saying. People try to think you need to go to the therapist because they don't know what's happening, but they'd rather make a quick judgment and condemn you for something they don't understand than actually figuring out what's happening for themselves. And really by themselves, because I don't need to explain myself. Nobody does. Need to explain themselves to another human being. But God sees all. The all-searching eye. So he's watching you go through your struggles, and he's watching the therapist go through theirs. And then he's watching the therapist get in their vehicle and go to their office and not want to try to help another human being when they need the help just as much, right? Yeah, so the therapist would get more if he would go to God. And I'm not saying that some don't, but that's what I mean when I say the therapist would get more from me than I would from them, is because I'm going to point them to the one that can actually help both of us, and does. If we draw near to him, he will draw near to us. You draw near to a therapist and they think you're clingy, and they try to tell you they're looking for other patients and now their slots are full. Yikes. And you put trust in something that cannot be trusted. So people trust their therapists so much until they quit their practice. And now the human being who was going to the therapy is crushed when nothing has changed. Human beings are still just as untrustworthy as they always have been and will be. Sinful by nature. I'm one of them. Untrustworthy. Do not trust me. Please do not believe me. I mean these things. I mean it, dude. I mean it when I say these words. Because this is what I mean. You think I'm lashing out. You think this and that. You think that guy is. You think this girl needs some counseling. All of a sudden, that person over there has got to go to therapy, or else everybody thinks they're wrong. And dangerous. Because people are scared of things that they are but don't want to believe. But they see it in other people, and they send them to therapy to try to fix what they won't address inside their own being, right? So God, right? The one and only Jesus Christ, he is the healer of all. He's the healer of the therapist and the ones that are trying to go to one. So stop trying to go to therapy. Go to Jesus Christ. Yeah, dude, because here's the thing, I got problems, and I'm going to always have problems. Your therapist has probably more problems than half the people coming into their clinic. And you think that the therapist knows all the answers, and so they're so helpful because they've done it. What they might have done is, became a therapist because they needed so much help, and so they thought that what they could do is find fulfillment in helping others. And, in ways there's fulfillment in that, for sure. But therapists get drained, man. And no matter how kind your therapist actually is, and or are saying that they are, and loving and open, and maybe they say, yeah, call me on my days off even, they're just as human as you, dude. Am I worked up? Do I need to calm down? Do you need to call a counselor? You know what I'm saying? Yikes. That's what happens, though. People go to therapy, and the therapist tells them it's good to feel emotions. But sometimes people go to therapy to try to stop feeling emotions. They get a little bit upset about something, and like, I should be perfect. That's at least what my significant other said, who was evil to me. And my tyrannical father, like Evan Strong, right? My dad growing up, he tried to get me to be perfect. And so what, you gonna send me to therapy? And so then I go to therapy, and all of a sudden, the therapist tells me, hey, it's good to feel emotions. There's a dynamic to a human being because we're humans who are being all that we are. And then it's like, gosh, so my earthly dad, he told me to be perfect, and he wanted me to be in everything that he ever tried to get me to be, which was really something I wasn't or can never be as well. So because I'm only a sinful human for existence of this life, now the therapist that I got sent to, he tells me that it is okay to have emotion and dynamic. What? Talk about a paradoxical gospel of Jesus Christ, the truth of all things. You're never going to go to the therapist and stop feeling emotions. You're going to go to the therapist, and if they're good at telling you how to be an authentic human being, the only way that our living God, Jesus Christ, designed us to be, the only way we can be, otherwise opposing the only thing that we are, what they say is, hey, yeah, feel emotions. Sometimes we're mad as human beings. They're sitting there looking at you and writing in their book, and that's okay. It's okay to feel mad. Process it. Understand what anger feels like. Let it flow. You were sad the other day? It is okay to feel sad. Human beings feel sad. Process it. Let it flow. Understand what the feeling of sadness means to you and through you. Right? So that's what a therapist actually tells you if they're good at doing what they are doing, which is really trying to help you just be what you are and not feel guilty about it. And the human beings around you trying to send you to therapy are making you feel guilty about it. So you'll go to the therapist and talk about all the guilt you have, and they'll be like, why do you feel so guilty? I'm glad you came to me, the therapist. And they'll say, because my family said I have to go to a therapist. And so it sounds like I'm the problem when I'm just doing all that I can. And so now what the heck? I'm going to sit on that for a second, or maybe 8. Talk about fathers, Abba, God himself, Jesus Christ, the actual one and only true father. I had an evil dad growing up. So condemn me for what I have said. But do it the way that Jesus Christ does it, and look at the entirety of my life, and take an accumulation of that, and judge righteously and rightfully, and judge the way that a perfect judge, the one and only Jesus Christ, judges. Otherwise, you're trying to send somebody to therapy, you're making them feel worse. And now they're going to therapy, and what they'll say within their visits with the therapist is how terrible their parents are to them, telling them they're the problem and that they need therapy. What? Talk about a roundabout. And you're trying to get somewhere. Just driving in circles. Right? But it's one eternal round. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled One Eternal Round. We live in the now, and God is all. And all there ever is. So the therapist would get more by people preaching the gospel to them, like me, if I were to be the one sent to the therapist, or like voluntarily trying to, but I wouldn't do this thing and this understanding that I now have and will always have from this point, because we learn what we learn and we know it at that point, right? You can't be held accountable for what you don't know, but once you do know, you are, and I know God. So I'm held accountable for what I have said, so condemn me for it, right? Meaning, if I were to go to the therapist, dude, and sit there and see if they could help me, I'd end up saying stuff like, look, you're trying to say some things, and I understand, but, you know, we're always going to struggle, I'm saying to the therapist, right, in this hypothetical. And you don't understand who Jesus Christ is. Let's say this hypothetical therapist doesn't. And let me tell you who he is, because he is who he says he is, and he's actually here and now, always. And when you're done therapisting, in other words, like being a therapist to all the people who come into your office, and you go home and feel like you now need a therapist yourself, well, you have had one the entire time, and so has every human being. It's Jesus Christ, the one who dwells within all, the one who is ever present. And so therapy is a joke. So I'm going to wrap it up. This is episode 95 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. We will have clothing available when we do, made out of 100% natural materials, staying centered, fitting correct, allowing the body to work. Make sure you purchase it in your size. Oversized clothing in itself is an imbalance. Thank you. It's the 5th of April, 2025. Check out the other 2 sides of the company, and goodbye.